Thank you, thank you. Please have a seat.
Hi everyone, my name is Veronica. Nice to meet you all. I work for Monarch Services and I'm just here to read a few poems. I hope you all enjoy them. The first one goes along with the painting that I did, but I am not able to show it at this time. You rise before the sun, the world ablaze. Your gaze already gone, the day's just begun. You walk around with a parched throat, no body of water can quench your thirst. Even the honey that drips from your throat misses, and you ponder on what can cure your sickness. A warm embrace, a frozen face. Either warmth will suffice if at the end you pay the price. So that's the first one. And the second one I wrote because at Monarch Services we have a program called Positive Solutions. And it's based on a that, and if you have any questions, the ladies in the back over there can answer them. So, the cycles we live in, so easy to demonize, yet seldom do you realize patterns in your own skin. It may not be in your nature to nurture the shadows who betray, trifle, and hurt. Those who give loved ones your misguided pain, which often returns back to you with a heavier load, often called shame. Living in recognition and even more in remission, but how do you heal when you don't allow yourself to feel the love of empathy? Thank you.
Good evening, welcome. My name is Sarah Emmert. I am the Director of Community Impact with United Way of Santa Cruz County. And it does look, I know we have a lot of wait-listed folks, but it does look like we have enough space. So those who are around the room in tables that don't have chairs that don't have tables, I do invite you to come and sit at a table when you're ready. And so for those that know me, know I care deeply about community well-being, and I am deeply passionate about community safety. And so welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It makes my heart smile to see all of you in the room, the faces I know and the new faces that I do not. And so I was only supposed to be up here briefly, sorry. But apparently due to traffic, our MC is running a little late. So the one thing about community organizing is you gotta be adaptable and flexible and jump right in when you need it. Table agendas. So everyone at their table should have an agenda with a QR code to upload the program. We opted to try to not kill a bunch of trees for this event. There's the Wi-Fi up there if you need to access the Wi-Fi, as well as the program QR code, but again, it's also at your table. Name tags, please put your name, write your name on the name tags, your pronouns if you prefer. That way we can really try to create a sense of community and everyone knows your name. Unfortunately, the bathrooms are broken right now, as I've told some of you. Yay for community college. No, I did 4 years here, so I can say that. But there are porta potties and hand washing stations in that direction. Again, there's refreshments out there. Please feel free to help yourself. I don't want to take those home with me. And all the materials will be sent out after the event. The PowerPoint, the handouts, all of that stuff. Photos and videos are encouraged. I was supposed to be the photographer today, but there's too much going on, so I very much encourage you taking photos and sending them to me. That being said, we ask that you do not take photos or videos during our land acknowledgement, so we can honor that request. So please help me do that. Let's see. Post-event survey. For those of you who are staying until 8, I hope all of you are, unless you communicated ahead of time. Please don't leave without completing the post-event survey. I got to submit some stuff, so that'll do me a big favor by completing that. Plus, it will really inform us, the Shared Safety Work Group, if we achieved our outcomes for today's event. And then so much gratitude for our funders. Thank you so much for those that financially contributed to this work. Probation through the Community Corrections Partnership. the Santa Cruz County Office of Education for sponsoring this venue with this amazing view, and also making sure that we didn't have to pay parking fees. Community Action Board for doing all the table supplies and buying all that stuff and so much more. Maria, thank you so much for you and your team for offering that. And Julie with Walnut Avenue and Family Women's Center for offering as well. The Community Corrections Partnership Shared Safety Work Group. Can I get the Shared Safety Work Group members to stand up, please? Come on, come on. So these are just some of the Shared Safety Work Group members, and I have the privilege of coordinating this amazing multidisciplinary collaborative that comes together on a monthly basis in deep commitments to community well-being and better meeting the needs of survivors of crime. Thank you so much for all of the work that you all do and are doing in this event and beyond, and creating community change. So can we get a round of applause for this? Okay, so shared safety. How many of you have heard of shared safety prior to this event? Okay, so just a few of you. So shared safety is the framework that we have been using in Santa Cruz County for the past 6+ years to really look at issues around community safety. Shared safety is about using a public health approach. It's about knowing that safety is more than just the absence of crime, but really safety is well-being in our community. It's about breaking the cycle of harm and making the system work, and importantly, centering survivors of crime. And you may or may not know, but this week is National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And so that was the reason why we decided to have this event during National Crime Victims' Rights Week. And in 2020, the Shared Safety Work Group developed essentially the county's strategic plan to better meet the needs of crime survivors. And since then, the Shared Safety Work Group and others in the community have been working to turn it into action. And restorative justice is just one of the recommendations within that strategic plan and that report. And to find the report and more information about what we've been doing, please go to United Way's Shared Safety page. It's on the bottom, and again, I'll send this out with the emails. Also, please do check out on everyone's tables or little quarter page sheets. How many of you have heard of 211? Okay, most of you have. So we developed, in connection with 211, a very specific resource page for survivors of crime. And that took years in the making, and it's an incredible resource, again, that's directed towards survivors of crime. And I was supposed to say without further ado, I'm turning it over to Sonia Werner, but not happening yet. Yay for Santa Cruz County traffic. So again, let's go to the event objectives. So here's what we're trying to do today, or this evening. Here we go. So we're trying to clarify the distinction between restorative justice and restorative practices, and you'll learn about that. We wanted to showcase the existing restorative practices in the community, hence the Restorative Practice Resource Fair. We also wanted to provide a platform for those with lived experience who have gone through restorative justice to share their experiences and their stories with that and the impact that it's had on themselves. And then we also want to foster community dialogue and connectedness, because that's, big picture, that's what most of this is all about. So again, everyone has agendas at their tables, and we're going to hear restorative practice overview, kind of big picture, what is restorative practices. Then one of our restorative justice experts is going to provide an overview about specifically what is restorative justice. Then we are going to hear from Assembly Member Dawn Addis. Hopefully that wasn't them texting me, saying they were in traffic as well, about 8060. Because that's really critical legislation that came out within the past year that we can leverage to truly increase restorative justice and restorative practices in our community. And then we're going to hear from our lived experience experts in a panel-style format. And then after that, we will transition to community or table conversations, because we do want to provide an opportunity for you all not just to be lectured at or not just to listen, but to really engage with what you've been hearing and really grapple with that, and an opportunity to create those connections. We'll close out with some next steps, and then for about 20 minutes after the event, you can go out and check out, the resource fair, the restorative practices. Yes. So who is in the room? There's community, there's education, there's electeds, there's government here, there's grassroots organizations, there's health, there's nonprofits, there's justice. I think we had about 160 folks register for the event, but still this is a full room, so it makes my heart happy. So thank you all. And according to Shared Safety, we need all of these folks. We need community, we need health, we need grassroots folks, we need justice, we need education. We need every sector in the community if we are going to create the Santa Cruz County that we want to see, that's thriving, that has well-being. Okay, registration responses. So for those of you that filled out the registration page, I had you answer 2 questions. And one of them was, I believe restorative practices can promote healing and restoration. So the majority of you actually indicated strongly agree. About a third-ish, I don't know what that is, a quarter said agree. A few of you weren't sure. And then a few said strongly disagree. And I do need to note that, that might not be fully accurate, that dark green, because several folks indicated that they accidentally pressed that instead of the strong and then in terms of how familiar you are with existing restorative practices, right? Because this is about increasing knowledge of and utilization. Most of you are actually very familiar with restorative practices in the community. A few of you aren't sure, definitely a chunk is unfamiliar, and then a few are unfamiliar. And so we're hoping to change these pie charts through the post-event survey. Okay, so if you can turn to your neighbors, in one sentence, brevity is leadership, right, Jose Flores? In one sentence, why are you here this evening? Go ahead and just turn to your neighbor and share. Hey everyone, I promise you will have more time. And if you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. So back when I used to coordinate the Youth Violence Prevention Task Force, and we were engaging educators with the Youth Violence Prevention Strategic Plan that the county did about, I don't know, I guess it's been 9 years now. Wow. And so I was at the County Office of Education engaging with educators from across the county about the recommendations that were included in the strategic plan. And they were talking amongst themselves, and I was trying to get their attention, and I was like, shh. They're like, that is not a best practice for engaging in a classroom. So thank you for bearing with me with the clapping. I figure that's funner than me shushing at you. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking now, and I am going to invite Mace and Sage up to do a land acknowledgement. Again, please no videos or cameras during this time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. We're honored that you opened up the space. So we can't talk about healing and restorative practices without acknowledging culture and reminding ourselves that restorative practices stem from and need to be grounded in indigenous practices and culturally based approaches. And as I talk about that, I can't talk about that without acknowledging Nane Alejandrez, one of my mentors, who, as I was coming into this work, really, provided a platform for so many in the community and emphasized the importance of culture when we're talking about community safety and healing. So thank you to Maze and her son Sage for opening us up. It was important for us, as we're talking about this and having this community forum, to not just stay in our heads, because it's so easy to do that sometimes, and recognizing that we need both our minds and our hearts to do this work. And we need to do things differently. Because I know that so many of us in this space are working on community issues and are dedicating their hearts and souls to this kind of work. And there's still a gap between where we are now and where we want to be as a community. And so when I say that we need to do things differently, it's not to discredit the work that we're all doing already. Please don't take it in that way, but something's missing. And so we're hoping that tonight you're inspired, you learn something, you're able to connect with others, and we're committed to making sure that this isn't just a one-off, right? It's not just an event to check the box. That we're all accountable to taking what we glean from today and doing something with it. So I'm going to ask our next speaker to come up. Is somebody I've also learned so much about in terms of healing and culture and community. Ben Alamino is going to provide an overview of restorative practices.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Great to see you. Thank you so very much for being here with us tonight, braving the traffic and foregoing maybe the gym or dinner or walk along the beach to be here with us, and we really need you here. It's an honor to see each and every one of you here. So good evening, friends, colleagues, relatives, leaders, teachers, community partners, educators. Thank you all so much for being here. Could you imagine a world where healing becomes an opportunity, where hurt becomes an opportunity that leads towards healing, right? And this is the promise of restorative practices, as I'm going to talk about for just a few moments. It's a set of approaches that prioritizes dialogue and transformation and compassion with accountability to repair harm and rebuild relationships. Sometimes the relationships are with our coworkers, or maybe with our friends, and sometimes with our family members or with our neighbors. But there's an opportunity there. Restorative practices also goes beyond techniques. It's a philosophy. And for many in this room, who I'm looking at right now, it's a way of life. Rooted, as Sarah said, and as we've seen in indigenous practices from around the world, restorative practices emphasize repairing harm, fostering belonging, creating community, and deepening and strengthening that within ourselves and within others. Imagine, for example, school setting, a student yells in class, and instead of just getting kicked out of class and sent to the office, or instead of getting suspended or just getting into detention, that student may be part of a restorative circle, where the teacher gets to discuss the impact of that disruption with the rest of the class, or the students can say their impact, or the student that was doing the yelling gets to say why they were yelling. Maybe they had a rough morning, maybe they had a rough night, maybe something's going on that made that student act out in class. Restorative practices leads us and encourages us to think about, instead of a time out for that kid, a time in. Instead of maybe a slap on the hand, it's a hand holding to say, how are you? What's going on? Sometimes creating a safe space instead of just a timeout by the student by themselves in a corner with their head down, feeling shameful or guilty or feeling like they're in trouble. Maybe they just need a moment or a minute to get grounded and take a few deep breaths, or a moment to sit alone and think about that. The student might explain their frustration. The teacher might explain the importance of a respectful, grounded classroom and a safe space for other people to learn. And other students, like I said, may say how that impacted them and how that reminded them of something else. And maybe offer an olive branch on how they could support that student in their moment of frustration, pain, or suffering as well. So through the dialogue, a student could apologize. And maybe the class as a one collective unit could create an environment for deeper learning and understanding. And that student, as well as the classroom and the teacher, that could be a beautiful moment for them within the classroom. And that's just one example of many, where the students will feel heard and respected. The teachers will feel great, and the other students will feel safe in the schools, right? And in communities, the restorative practices also bring together victims and offenders and community leaders and community members to discuss the impact of harm and find collective solutions. So, for example, imagine a party in the community where maybe one neighbor has their music really loud, maybe has a band or a DJ, or it's just boom, boom, boom. You hear all the music, and the other neighbor's trying to go to sleep. Maybe there's a newborn or a tough deadline at work or reports due or who knows what. And in a neighborly dispute, instead of maybe just, calling the cops or having a neighborhood conflict or something that could potentially lead to more resentment and anger and frustration, potentially a community dialogue can be facilitated with the principles of restorative practices to maybe discuss why they were having a party, what was the reason, and maybe the other neighbor could discuss the impact of the disruption of their sleep when the music was going on at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock at night with the band bumping the bass on their window and not letting them sleep. Perhaps a restorative dialogue could be facilitated where they talk about that. And in these moments, this is silly to say, but I honestly believe this in my heart of hearts, you can never underestimate the impact of a taco given in friendship, right? Or some bread, or some steak or some barbecue, or who knows what it is of your barbecue party of choice. And perhaps through that restorative practices, an agreement could be made where maybe the next party will be held at another location. Or maybe after 10 o'clock or 10:30, the music will go down silently. Or maybe 2 days after the party, there's a neighborhood cleanup, and we all collect recyclables, or who knows what it is. But within our communities, there are tremendous amount of opportunities for connection, engagement, transformation, and peacemaking with each other. The partygoers might understand the impact of the noise on their sleep, et cetera, and this could be a wonderful thing where maybe throughout the year, the calendar year, different people have different parties at their house, and instead of parking being a headache, they take turns parking across the street, or parking down the road, or parking somewhere else. Or I say, hey, I'm having a party this weekend, and you're invited. Please feel free to come, but bring a dish. Something along those lines. And if you don't eat meat, that's cool. Bring something to drink. Whatever it is, but restorative practices encapsulate that. Also, research has shown that within the courts, restorative justice and restorative practices can lead to less hurt feelings and less reliance upon the criminal justice system alone, and offers an opportunity for transformation that does not skip out on accountability, but allows people to feel heard, to feel safer, and see the impacts of their actions, which can be restorative and long-lasting and create a bigger impact. For example, this highlights the power of being heard and having a voice in the healing process, which is something all of us want or want to create another world for each other to have. And there's also data that shows that these practices, through restorative practices, lead to reductions in recidivism rates. And again, reliance on the criminal justice system alone, and offers the community and other folks to an opportunity to be part of the process of creating community safety. And these are not just feel-good exercises, but these are creating tangible outcomes and shifts in people's lives. So you're going to hear more about that tonight through some of the other speakers and information that's going to be shared with you all. But I just want to thank you and say that restorative practices can be used in a number of different ways. For example, restorative circle on vandalism, where maybe somebody got their windows broken, their fence tagged on, or who knows what. Could also offer an opportunity where people could discuss their experience of having their home tagged and maybe what it triggered for in them. And maybe the young person could say why he or she wanted to tag and wants to be an artist, or maybe be a street artist. And though you think it looks ugly, they're trying to be the next Banksy or street artist or something along those lines. And through restorative practices, maybe this conversation, thank you, could lead to a community art project, or community cleanup, or graffiti cleanup, or something along those lines, where this young person now has access to colored markers, colored pencils, some sketchbooks, things along that lines, where everybody feels understood and heard and safe as of an outcome, instead of feeling misunderstood or shameful, or like you've done something really wrong. So I just want to implement that and speak to that a little bit, and also ask you all to get involved. Obviously you're here, just want to say thank you again for being here, but speak to each other, speak to your neighbors. This room is full of community people that you want to talk to, you want to get names, you want to get emails. You want to talk to each other to make this web stronger. And thank you all for being here as we move towards the future of creating a more restorative and just society with all of the people in this room. Hopefully the next event will have to have a bigger place for even more people. But I just want to thank you all. I'll be in the back if you have any questions. But thank you for being here and hearing me out today. It was an honor to see you. And I hopefully look forward to speaking more with all of you again in the future. So thank you for listening to my brief overview on restorative practices.
Thank you. That was Ben Alamia with the County Office of Education. My name is Sonia Brunner, and I am a council member of the City of Santa Cruz. And thank you, Ben, so much for articulating some of those restorative practices. I think it's really important to realize that it's all about relationships and relationship building in our justice system. And so with that, my introduction to restorative justice here in Santa Cruz County has been working with this next speaker, Elia Vautier, who is with the Conflict Resolution Center. And I'd like to invite Elia up to talk about restorative justice overview. Thank you.
Thank you all. Nice to see everyone here tonight. My name is Elia Vautier. I'm the Restorative Justice Programs Director at the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County. And we've been implementing restorative justice in this county for over 20 years, originally working with youth, and now expanding to working with adults and more serious harm. So thank you, Ben, for your overview of restorative practices. Just to highlight some of the things he said. So restorative practices really works on creating strong communities, connections, and a strong sense of belonging, which we need in order to respond to harm in meaningful ways and healthy ways, right? So when there's a stronger sense of belonging and connection when harm or wrongdoing occurs, then we can step in with restorative justice response with more success. So restorative practices are proactive, while restorative justice is reactive. Restorative practices builds the container that allows restorative justice to be successful, and so we need both. So in my work with both youth and adults, I've seen the profound impact that restorative justice can offer the people involved in a process. I've seen people who've been harmed gain closure and relief after meeting with the person who harmed them. I've seen people who caused harm express gratitude for the opportunity to repair the harm, take true accountability, and be reintegrated back into the community. After one such restorative dialogue, the person whose store was broken into, robbed, and vandalized said this to the person who caused them harm. There's value in getting this off my chest, to see you and talk with you. Now I really do have closure after being able to talk to you. I was reluctant to participate, but at the end of the day, I'm glad I did this. This was one of the best meetings I've ever had. Restorative justice dialogues and other processes can be catalysts for healing, closure, reintegration, and relief. There are as many definitions of restorative justice as there are practitioners of restorative justice. If you Google it, you will find many. I've been working in this field for over a decade, and I still have a hard time fully defining this process. It is fundamentally a paradigm shift in the way that we respond to harm and wrongdoing, right? It's a way to respond to harm that does not cause more harm. It's a way to respond to harm that centers the voice and choice of survivors or people who've been impacted. And it's a way to respond to harm that promotes healing, accountability, repair, and addresses underlying causes. And we likely all know that when wrongdoing occurs in our communities, it's in our lives, it's people and relationships who are impacted. It's you, it's me, it's our families, our neighbors who are harmed and affected. Therefore, healing, accountability, and meeting needs should be at the center of any response to harm and wrongdoing. This is one definition that I found that sort of sums it up. I like the way it sums it up. Restorative justice is a framework and process that starts with the needs of the people who've been harmed, brings the impacted community together, and facilitates true accountability, acknowledgement, repair, and change that decreases the chance that harm will happen again. So restorative justice is a vision of that invites accountability, choice, agency, meeting the needs of people who've been harmed, and facilitation of meaningful repair. When done well, it can lead to true healing. The healing of the persons who've been harmed, the healing of the persons who caused harm, and the healing of the greater community. Because when harm occurs in our community, it impacts out to everybody. We've likely all experienced that. Right? When there's been loss of precious lives in our community, we feel the impact of those losses, no matter how connected we are to those people or not. So restorative justice is really relational, and it asks what relationships need to be mended, attended to, and healed. Any restorative justice response must put the needs, choice, and voice of victims and survivors at the forefront. In a restorative justice response process, survivors are often given agency to define their own needs and are not at the mercy of the court legitimizing their needs. Survivors often state that simply being asked questions like, how do you define the harm? What do you need now? What will make this right? Is the most important part of the process because it allows them to reconnect with their power after experiencing trauma that made them feel powerless. People can provide benefits, restorative justice can provide benefits to all those who are involved in an incident of harm, the survivors, the people who caused harm, and the greater community of people. And it also calls on the community to take part in repair and future prevention of harm. For those of you who are familiar with restorative justice, you all know this grid. It's one of the foundations that helps us understand the difference between the criminal justice system and the restorative justice. On the left, is that, yeah, your left? Okay, yeah. On the left is how the criminal justice system responds to harm, and on the right is the restorative justice response. So when a law is broken in the criminal justice system, you've offended against the state, right? The state steps in as the primary victim and determines the next step. And the people who have been impacted are often secondary to the process of justice. The criminal justice system asks, what laws have been broken? Who did it? What do they deserve? And then crime is seen as a violation of law and against the state, right? Violations create guilt, and therefore justice requires the state to determine guilt and impose punishment. Now, restorative justice has a very different starting place. It asks who's been hurt, what are their needs, whose obligations are those? And crime is seen as a violation of people and relationships, and those violations create obligations. And justice involves the victims, the people who have been harmed, the people who caused harm in the community to determine how to repair the harm done. Built into any restorative justice process is active and meaningful accountability, contrary to common beliefs about restorative justice kind of being soft or light or getting off easy. And I say it's active because in the criminal justice system, people are often passive recipients of punishment, denying they caused harm and avoiding responsibility. It's often discouraged for people who've caused harm to say, I did this. I'm sorry, and I want to fix what I broke. Whereas the system of restorative justice actively supports the taking of true accountability by the person who caused harm. Imagine what it would be like to hear someone who caused you harm to say, yes, I did this, the first step. I understand now how this impacted you, the second step. I'm sorry what I did caused you harm, it matters to me, the third step. Here are the things I'm working on to repair the harm, the fourth step, and to make sure this doesn't happen again, the fifth step. Imagine how that level of accountability can promote well-being in our communities, not just for the person who's impacted, but also for their family, friends, and neighbors. But also, there's healing to be found for the person who caused harm in taking of accountability and making things right. This is a quote by Danielle Surratt, who runs an organization called Common Justice in New York, and she says, I've witnessed accountability as an unparalleled tool for transforming shame for responsible parties. It gives us a way to recuperate our sense of dignity, of self-worth, and connectedness and of hope, the things we lost when we caused harm. I've come to see accountability as something that is as essential as a grieving process to restoring us to our best selves. So accountability not only provides healing and restoration for the person who is harmed, but it's also a pathway of healing for the person who caused harm. I like to think of restorative justice as a bird with two wings. Right? One wing is support, voice, healing, and agency for the person who's been harmed. The other wing is support for accountability, change, and healing for the person who caused harm. You cannot have a bird with just one wing and hope that your community will heal from harm and wrongdoing. So we must endeavor to support everyone involved in an incident of harm. Now, restorative justice doesn't just sound good. The data shows that it's working in all different ways. lowers recidivism rates. Recidivism is the likelihood that a person will commit a new crime after being found guilty of a crime previously. It increases victim satisfaction. It's less costly than the criminal justice system. There's a lot of data out there. There was a systemic review of programs in the United States, Australia, and the UK in recent years that found restorative models decrease the risk of reoffending, especially for violent crimes. And I thought that was really interesting because there is a growing body of evidence that shows that restorative justice works better, has better outcomes, lower recidivism rates, higher victim satisfaction for more serious cases, especially cases of violent crimes. So this goes against our commonly held belief that restorative justice is just for young people or for minor misdemeanors and smaller harms. So I'm just gonna let you cook on that one. So here in Santa Cruz, we're really lucky to have a lot of restorative justice programs. You can talk to a lot of these folks out there. We've got the Conflict Resolution Center, which I work out with the different youth and adult programs. We're partnering with Walnut Avenue Family and Women's Center on an alternative justice program for DV. The DA's office has stuff going on. County Office of Education Volunteer Center. I'm running out of time. There's also a lot of great organizations doing restorative practices in the community, Barrios Unidos, Millbug, CAB, Monarch, and many others. So restorative practices builds the container of strong communities and connection and a sense of belonging so that when harm and wrongdoing occurs, we can respond in meaningful and healthy ways, right? In our modern society, restorative justice is often happening outside of organic communities and families and is being operated within systems by system players, which has its pros and cons. But essentially, if we don't have a strong sense of belonging and connection to our community, and we're always outsourcing our conflicts to police and the authorities, then restorative justice can only go so far in healing, mending, and repairing our wounds. And that is where you all come in, right? We can collectively strengthen our communities and reclaim our agency in handling our own conflicts. For example, we can learn conflict resolution skills and reclaim our conflicts, get to know our neighbors, invite dialogue with people who think differently than us, see beyond labels, work on getting more comfortable with conflict. When harm occurs, ask what is needed, seek accountability over punishment, aim for integration over exclusion. Together, we can create more connected communities where we can respond to harm in ways that promote healing and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Alaya. This next speaker I'd like to introduce is our California Assembly member, Don Addis, who represents the 30th District, which includes Santa Cruz County, Monterey, South, all the way including San Luis Obispo. And she will be speaking with you all on Assembly Bill 60, AB 60, which is about community-based restorative justice programs provided to victims of crime by law enforcement agencies throughout the state. So please welcome Assemblymember Don Addis.
Do you guys need to stand up for a minute? Have you been sitting for too long? I'm a teacher, so I just encourage you. I am your California State Legislator, Assemblymember Don Addis, but also I was a classroom teacher for over a decade, so I just encourage you to do your thing for a moment while I settle in, and I'll start by saying my thank yous. First and foremost to United Way of Santa Cruz County, to all of the community members that are here, and to the nonprofits that have joined this resource fair. But just for my own understanding, I heard there's a lot of different kinds of people in the room, and so I'm just kind of wondering if are there any teachers? Let me just start with my people. Are there there's teachers in the room? Are there lawyers and judges and kind of court-involved folks are in the room as well? Community advocates, can you raise your hand if you're a community advocate? Parents in the room? There's got to be a lot. How about students that are in the room? Okay, so we do have a broad gamut. How about folks that know what the assembly is? There's like a couple of you, right? Yeah. Okay, so it's like we're Congress, but Congress for California. So we do have the Assembly, which is like the House. We actually have a speaker. And then we have the State Senate, which is much like the State Senate, which is smaller. I'm part of the Assembly, and And we've got 80 members in the assembly. I represent close to 500,000 people, so from up here in the Santa Cruz area all the way down to southern San Luis Obispo County, and have a huge constituency, and just very, very honored to get this invite to be with you this evening. So I want to say another thank you. And I know that you're here tonight, I'm here tonight because of a belief in building stronger communities. And that's really what AB 60 is founded in, and I'll talk a little bit about the bill in a moment. But I will say that the work that I see in this room, I know this as a mom, I know this because I was a special education teacher for such a long time, and I know this as a legislator now, that we're here together because we do want to pave a brighter future. We want to create a brighter future, and restorative justice practices are a piece of that brighter future. And so I mentioned this, but you know, as I legislate, I was elected in 2022, so I'm going into my second year in the legislature, and I really had to think about, you know, what's different about me, about the voice that I bring. And a big piece of that is having been an educator and wanting to interrupt the school to prison pipeline, having worked with children with emotional disabilities and with kiddos that really face some big challenges that I knew had a high propensity of possibly becoming justice-involved youth. And it's a unique lens that I bring, and it's why when I got this invite to talk about AB 60, I thought, oh, that's right up my alley. I would be absolutely happy to do that. I'll also tell you that prior to being in the legislature, I was in community organizing. I organized the Women's March in San Luis Obispo in 2016, and we did phenomenally on the fundraising side. We outraised what we needed to be able to put that march on, and so immediately we looked around for other nonprofits that we could donate funds to, and one of the most important programs that we ended up donating to is a restorative program for women leaving the justice system who are being reunited with their children for the first time again, coming out of incarceration, and the healing that those programs bring when, especially for children, actually, I would say, for mothers in particular, but really especially for children, to be able to have those services and supports for reunification. And so restorative practices, again, was a huge, huge piece of that work. In the legislature, a lot of my bill package this year has been focused on sexual assault. So whether it's preventing sexual assault and harassment, or it's on the justice side of how we respond when somebody has experienced sexual assault and harassment or sexual abuse as a child. And we're actually right now I'm working to lift the statute of limitations in criminal court on child sex assault. And so it got me really thinking about this intersection between justice and the justice system and really heinous crimes, and restorative justice, and what do we do and how do we sort of balance all that out. And it's important questions that we have to grapple with. But I will say that having a survivor-centered approach cannot solely focus on consequences. So when we think about child sex abuse in my work, to lift statute of limitations so people can come forward in criminal court, the purpose of that is looking for justice through the criminal system, and it's very important work. But what I've learned talking with survivors is that's not the whole picture. Is that that's only one piece for survivors in terms of getting justice. And the other pieces that are incredibly, incredibly important are simply around being heard and redeveloping relationships and reconnecting into society, sometimes in a healing way, with the very person that caused harm. And that's why restorative practices are so important. And California, over time, has renewed a focus on what is called victims' rights. So in the 80s, we passed the Victims' Bill of Rights. In the early 2000s, there was a new movement on the Victims' Bill of Rights, so that what we would call victims had a way to speak up for themselves. And I would say we're now moving into a time where we think of people less and less as victims and more as survivors, because we want to focus on the whole person, and that whatever happened to them doesn't have to define their entire being. And I will say, when we talk about survivorship, this idea of restorative justice absolutely has to intersect. And so we want to have accountability. We need to repair harm. We have to build relationships. And so there's been this movement towards restorative practices, and I think you just heard a lot about that. I caught the tail end of the last person. But the important thing that AB 60 does, which is what I was asked to talk to you about, is it provides survivors information and resources about the restorative practices and programs that exist across the community, in the county, in county jails, in juvenile detention centers, and through the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And I do want to say that we think of our prison system as a place to lock people up, but its real mission is not just lock people up, it's corrections and rehabilitation, and we need restorative justice practices to do that. So what AB 60 does is it says people have a right, survivors have a right to know of the resources available to them if they want to engage in restorative practices or in structured settings where they can gain some restorative justice. And it says that as early as possible and at multiple stages, so not just once, but multiple stages, from initial contact to post-conviction proceedings, people will be provided with resources, and I'm reading this because I want to get it right, to ensure that survivors are well informed and can make decisions about participating in restorative justice practices. And I'll just add that nobody should be forced to engage in restorative practices, right? If all you want to do is get a conviction, that should be your choice, to engage in the justice system that way. But there are a whole host of other services that can give people the healing, can make people feel heard, that it's our obligation as a state and as a government to, at least at their very core, let people know. So enacting AB 60, your California legislature last year, myself included, it passed by overwhelming margins. I would say we recognized that it's important, these things that I've just talked about, being heard, having an opportunity for structured and supportive restorative conversations, rebuilding of relationships, and the true accountability that comes with having to apologize for what you've done and make amends, and for a survivor to be able to hear that. And our criminal system doesn't allow for that as much as our restorative justice practices do. And so that's why this legislation was so incredibly important. And I'll just kind of leave you with this thought, is that as a mom, as a teacher, with those two lenses that I've brought to the legislature, I do believe it's my job and it's all of our jobs to create a California that understands that it's not just about accountability, that it's not just about locking people away. We've done huge work in that way, but that it's also about prevention and it's also about healing, and that's how we're going to bring our communities together. And I'm just incredibly proud that this room is here talking about this. It's huge to see a community like this that has come together really with healing and creating communities that want to support one another is what I see in this room. So I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for the honor of being able to speak with you, and just appreciate all of you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Assemblymember Dawn Addis. At this time, we have a panel I'd like to invite up, and I would like Jack Brown with Neighborhood Courts, Russell Brian Love, New School Community Day School, and Abby Mustafa, muralist artist, please. So this part of the program I think is really important. It's an opportunity to provide a platform for these three people to share their lived experiences with a restorative justice process. And so I'll start off and ask each of you to introduce yourselves, and I'll start at the end with Jack.
My name is Jack Brown. I was involved with the community court, or neighborhood court, I believe it was last year. And it stemmed from a situation I had when I was working on a political measure for Measure D in 2022. And we had 36 signs that were vandalized one night that went everywhere from Watsonville all the way up into Santa Cruz. The campaign was very polarizing, as probably many of you remember. We had 450 signs stolen over the entire campaign during that time, and so one of the people had a security camera and caught the license plate of the person that committed the crime, where we were able to trace it back to him, and the person was arrested.
My name is Brian Love. I'm lead teacher at New School Community Day School, which is Santa Cruz County's only community day school. So community day schools serve students who have been expelled or are in desperate need of credit recovery, have extreme attendance issues, or a condition of their probation. That's how they come to New School.
My name is Abby Mustafa, and I'm an artist and muralist, and right now I'm the artist in residence at Housing Matters. And I got to participate in the restorative justice process when a mural that I helped put together for the community was vandalized. In 2020 we put it together, and it was vandalized in 2022, I believe, and we got to go through a really amazing process with that.
Thank you, Abby. And at this time, I just have a few questions that I'd like to present for you to share and dive a little deeper into each of you have had a restorative justice experience, and maybe 10 minutes we'll take to talk about the impact that the restorative justice process had and on healing, on coping, and the harm that was had and what you felt and what that process was like.
I did a mural I helped do a mural. Over 500 people came out to create the Black Lives Matter mural. And the mural, there was a lot of conflict around initially just getting it going, but there was so much unanimous, everything that we applied for went through unanimously. So there was a lot of opportunity for discussion, and people were allowed to come and talk, and a lot of people didn't. They waited until later to come and vandalize it or to talk about it online, which was really frustrating. So for me, when it was vandalized, the frustrating part was that we had gone through a huge process to get it approved, where we asked for community feedback, and some people participated and some people chose not to participate and to just do whatever they wanted, which is this whole act of entitlement that you can just do what you want. So that was the hurt in it for me, was that I have to follow rules, and there's certain people in our community who believe that they don't have to. And in going through this process, I was able to learn about who these people were, where they came from, why they believed that, a little bit more about the background that made them believe and do certain things that they did. And I think that was helpful to me for just maintaining my humanity, to get to know someone else. That it sounds so cliche, but hurt people. And so that's really true, and it really came out in this process. And in getting to know the perpetrators of this, I really got to see myself in them in some ways, not in this exact example, but in ways that I have thought in very binary terms about things that I've seen in the news or in the media, and it helped me reflect on myself as well. I think some of the harm that was caused when these two young men did burnouts on the BLM mural was that there's so much mystery around who these perpetrators are, and when you have the opportunity to sit down with them, that alone deflates a huge bubble around the actual harm that they would, could, or want to potentially perpetrate. So all the stories that we have in our head are instantly dispelled when you get to sit down and actually ask them these questions, and a lot of times you find out that like it's not everything that you thought it was. So in a way, that alone was really healing for a lot of people. I think just being able to sit in a room where you felt safe because the people that were there with you were on your side is also really healing, given you know, a lot of the things that we heard in court.
How many people were in that process?
We went through, yeah, so we had many different iterations. We had a community forum where people were invited to come and ask questions that they would like presented to these people before we actually sat down with them. So we had time to have these questions and thoughts presented to them and to let them mull it over with some mediators, actually some of them are here right now, and some mentors as well, so that they could have a little bit of guidance and perspective and somebody who's also listening to them and giving them a little bit of space to process. So we did that, and then we had 2 different dialogues, one with each of the perpetrators, and each of them, I think, consisted of like 12 to 15 people. And so it was community members who felt affected, who felt that they had the capacity to show up in a way that was pertinent to that situation. And then the community forum, I don't know, I want to say there were like 30 some people there, maybe 30 to 40. I think Alaya has those numbers somewhere, but yeah, it was different people at different times. And there was a lot of emails and letters and things that we also included for people who didn't feel safe showing up. So we tried to reach as many people as we could in different ways because not everyone felt safe showing up the same way.
Was there healing?
I can only speak for myself.
Yes.
You know, I think for me there was a lot of healing. Like I said, for me personally, it really deflated this bubble around the potential violence that could be inflicted on me in my community. I had there was just too much mystery around who these people were, if they did in fact have weapons, and these things that had been presented in court. The court case almost made it worse. I think for everybody it was dragged on for 16 months when literally all we wanted them to do was clean up their mess. So going through court, just to get a guilty verdict, all this other stuff had to come out that I don't know was helpful to the process, and I don't know how much of it was really the truth of who they were, but having to present that just to find them guilty, to influence them to participate in this, was also really traumatizing. So I think for me, deflating the mystery around who they actually were was really, really healing. And seeing some other people come to those conclusions as well, seeing other people in my community get to ask the questions that they've been asking each other and talking about, I think that was really, really good. And we're actually having a picnic next Thursday with these 2 young men and the community who everyone's invited. So part of it is to create a safe space for people who maybe weren't invited, to be intimate dialogue. And also, I have a friend who very specifically was like, I haven't ever felt safe in participating, but I think it would feel good for me to go and watch them interacting with other people that I feel safe with. So there's trying to create more opportunities for people to have an experience that they maybe didn't have capacity for. That feels healing to me in so many ways.
Thank you, Abby, for sharing that. And I know that was a huge part of what was asked in the restorative justice process was meaningful community service, meaningful connections. Ben Alamillo talked about relationships and relationship building and really bringing them into community, and there were other opportunities where they were invited to participate, invited to Juneteenth and Santa Cruz Black fundraiser. I think there were many opportunities, so this community picnic is kind of just keeping it going. and keeping the healing going. I'm sure for some people it might be ongoing, and for others, like Alaya had mentioned, it could be a one-time thing. So I'm going to pass it on to Russell, and if you could share with us your personal experience with restorative justice.
We are in the middle of converting to restorative practices at our school. So when I first started there, it was very much 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. Because we're new school's the end of the line. You've already been kicked out of multiple other programs. They didn't work for you. Everybody recognized that was the end of the line, and so it was very much, down to language, cussing, wearing something that was red or blue. It was very much 3 offenses, you got to move on. You had your chance. And so this is a real paradigm shift for us to be moving into restorative practices where, recognizing that suspension and expulsion is just an ongoing, really a day off for our students. There's no repercussions at home because there's nothing at home. That's how they wound up with us in the first place, right? And so the practices that we're focusing on is really restorative circles and doing restorative circles ahead of crisis, ahead of problems, so that our students are accustomed to it, and it becomes part of our culture, part of what we do there, sharing, and then when there is a problem and a crisis, we can have a restorative circle. That's where we're really addressing an issue or a problem. The other one is conflict resolution. So, we have a certain population at New School that they're not boring. Everyone there is volatile. And so I often speak with other teachers and they say, it must be so great you have 17, 18 kids in your classroom. I said, well, the 3 kids in your classroom that are disruptive every day, I only have the all-stars. So conflict resolution is, a key practice, whether it's just me saying, hey, you and me need to step outside of our classroom because someone's being particularly disruptive or disrespectful, or going to mediation, on campus. And we struggle with that a little bit just because we only have one 80% counselor. But so that means it's on us as a staff, right? We each have to handle our own problems and our own relationships with each individual student. And then the third practice that, is really my wheelhouse and what I care about most is service learning projects. So we're out in the community once a week at New School. We're out in the community doing something with community partners, whether it's Watsonville Wetlands Watch or the City of Watsonville, or we have about 30 community partners that we work with consistently. And so that's really not answering your question about restorative justice at all, but that's where I'm at with restorative practices. And so that's why Ben's put me on here.
Thank you. I think it's important that there's different lenses, and again, it ties back to the relationship building and that kind of shift in how we respond. And you're teaching that to people who may not be exposed or have access to those types of tools. So thank you. Jack, same question to you.
Sorry, I got ahead of myself earlier, but we had very interesting interaction with it. So through cameras that picked up the guy's license plate, the sheriff put on a very grand parade of when they did pick up the suspect. They waited for him to leave his house, had 4 or 5 cars follow him and then pull him over on Highway 1 and arrest him on the highway and tow his car and everything. And he spent, I think, probably a day or 2 in jail from that, what I learned. And after they had caught him, I said, the election's over, we lost, we understand that, but, if he would just apologize for what he did, I'm willing to drop the charges on what happened. And so that, I think, got us into the neighborhood courts with that statement. And I was just very pleased that we were able to do this, because as a young man, I made a lot of silly mistakes in my life, and there's a great Oscar Wilde quote of experience is the name given for mistakes. And so I just wanted this person to have an experience and to learn from it, and was very thankful for the opportunity for us to do this. We met at Capitol Library. We didn't go to a courthouse. We didn't go to an office building. It was a very neutral ground where we met. We were in a community room, and there was, I think, 5 or 6 people that were in the room with us. And it was like Avi had said, it took that bubble away. We thought there was some grand conspiracy of a lobbyist that sent somebody out to do all this work. And meeting the person, George, found out, he just was having a bad day. He heard a lot of information, which, I felt was incorrect. But he got to explain himself of why he acted out and he had a bad day that day. And we got to talk to each other and get to know each other through this. And, through the experience, I just asked, I said, if you could just write an apology letter to the 36 people that were just trying to express their support on the side of an issue that felt terrorized by having their signs X'd out or yanked out of the ground. And, it scared a lot of people just before the election. I said, I'm okay, I'm used to it, but these other people were very traumatized from it. And it felt through this whole environment that I got a real, connection with him and a heartfelt apology for what had happened. And so I said, don't put your name on it. I don't want this to follow you anywhere, but just at least write it for us, and so we can distribute it back to the people, and you show how everything went. And so it worked out great. We got the apology letter sent out, and we were all very friendly through the whole experience, and actually George and I went out and he bought me lunch a week later, and so we still keep in contact, and found out he's a filmmaker, and so we established a connection there. So it was just a very great experience. So very happy.
Do you feel that you had healing through that process?
Yeah, because I think we were very. It was good to understand where his actions came from, why he felt like he had to. I don't agree with you. It was
and
like,
what about the 36 other people?
There was a mix of reactions. There were some people that were very happy and also thankful that I represented them through this. But there was a range of emotions that were there. But I think in the end, it was the only way you could really, provide restoration in a situation like this, and I think it worked out really well.
My next question, you can keep the mic, and hopefully you all can hear me. What would you like to see going forward with restorative justice in our community?
So quickly for me, so I was involved in 2 different things going on essentially at the same time. I had this issue with the sign vandalism, and also I got followed home one night by a DUI suspect, or whatever you want to call it, that threatened me for driving faster in the neighborhood when I was in my neighborhood doing 20 miles an hour. So I called the CHP and gave them the description, and she had gone around the corner and pulled over and came into my car, and I told her to go back into her car. And anyways, they came and arrested her, and this was a 4-year ordeal of going through the criminal justice system with, luckily this DUI didn't hurt anybody. She passed out in her car, and they were able to arrest her and all that from that. But if there was an ability to expand the program into other crimes, because this person was a repeat offender, she had a DUI record before this, and through the process, they took away her license, she was still driving without a license, still got another DUI, wound up settling for wet reckless, and still hasn't paid her fines. But I still get texts from the courts about it, and it's like, I'd like to see it expanded so that other people can get an education of, what they're doing in those sort of situations.
Yeah, well, all this is amazing, that this stuff, that I see implemented at our small school is happening in the community is just sort of beyond my expectations. Like it's terrific. All this work and this movement is beautiful, and it's mind expanding for me, because I have a narrow vision. I go to a school of 50 kids. There's 4 teachers there. We have this little cult of restorative practices we're doing, right? But to see that it's that it's applied out in the world, and it's beyond. You're guilty. This is your charge. This is your time. All that is so binary and black and white and middle, and it just doesn't fix anything. It makes it. I don't want to take too much time, but it makes me think of my dad was mental health director of Nevada County when I was coming up, and I was a very problematic kid. And so I was always getting in trouble, and really for, I don't know, there's probably deep reasons we're not going to get into right now, but everybody said, why? You come from such a good family, and I just remember being so envious of the kids that got spanked, because that was so simple. Like, that's it. Like, you do this, you get spanked, boom, you're done. So great. My dad said, no, you're suspended, come home. He was a practitioner of restorative justice back then, and it was painful. So it's a much more difficult process. It's a much more sophisticated, intelligent process. It takes more toll. It builds empathy. It's torturous, right? But the results are, I'm not just saying this about myself, but you become a better person, a more well-rounded person. You have empathy, you have conscience, right? Which is something, a really significant issue that we deal with a lot of our students come in and they have no conscience. They don't understand why they should do anything different than what they did to you. Well, they don't understand disrespect. They don't understand disrespecting themselves or the people around them. And so, teaching empathy is a very tricky thing. And this is it. Restorative practices, restorative justice.
Could you talk about the closing circle you guys have every day?
Oh yeah, every day, and this goes back. So we just celebrated 30 years at New School. New School was founded by Don Eagleston and Albino Garcia back in 1994, and it was started because there was, like Albino always says, to keep kids above ground. It was a real war zone in Watsonville at that time, and it was a real serious thing to have a place for those expelled students to go, besides staying on the street and recruiting more gang members, right? And so I learned from them, and they've passed their traditions on. And one of the traditions is every day for 30 years now, we have a end of day circle where we say 30 years ago, a Native American named Andres Segura blessed New School with incense and prayers and taught us about the circle of respect. No one stands behind anyone, and any member may speak. We ask for something good to happen today, and then we nominate someone to help the whole group. And then we go from there, and that's how we do our announcements, and we do, we share at the end of every day for 30 years. So that's thanks for bringing that up. And
I think I would like to see restorative justice be the first option instead of the last. I felt like in the 16 months that we were in court, everything that we had to go through this was what we were just asking for from the beginning, was really frustrating, and that caused a lot more harm than if we had just immediately gone into restorative justice, which all parties involved were asking for. So it should have been an option because we essentially were the victims at the time, and it made everyone feel like we didn't have a voice. We had to have so much advocacy and like have the community really show up over and over and over, which was, that was really amazing to see. But to feel like we had to work so hard to get in the end what we had just asked for in the very beginning was really frustrating. And I think, opened up a lot of other conversations about the systems changes that we need. So that's what I want.
Thank you. So interesting, and I know that even in my short time, and many of you have been in this work for decades, but you learn that there are different processes practiced throughout the state and in other places, and it's really interesting. I hope that we can continue to learn and grow and advocate for some of those next steps and how we shift systems and into a more healing process.
So we wanted to bring in the voice as much as we could about people who've caused harm. So I'm working with a man who caused harm here in the community in Santa Cruz some years ago. He caused harm to quite a few people. And he felt that the criminal justice system did not hold him accountable, and he wanted to hold himself accountable and try and provide healing to the people he harmed. So I just asked him to write a little blurb. He says, I learned about the CRC completely by accident, walking to the court from where I was staying at the time. I looked it up on my phone and thought wistfully that I wished I would have known about it sooner. I was under court orders not to contact anyone impacted by my actions. Those orders held for the 3 years of probation following my judgment. I thought about the Restorative Justice Program and the Conflict Resolution Center in the years that followed, even had preliminary conversations with them about the process in 2021, but was unable to do anything until my probation ended in March of 2023. When we did start working together, I explained that I've been working a 12-step program since 2019, and I saw this process as part of my 9th step amends, to take accountability for my actions in front of those impacted and hear firsthand how they were affected. The people who were impacted were invited to share how my actions affected them and ask for what they need for accountability. Although I did not speak to people directly, I was able to hear how my actions impacted people and then offer my remorse and sincere apologies in return via the facilitator. Several people told the facilitator that even this process of telling the facilitator how they'd been impacted and hearing my response was healing for them. Most people didn't respond, and who can blame them? It'd been 3 years. And then one person expressed a willingness to talk to me. We had a Zoom call with the facilitator present. My life has changed in many ways since 2019, and this call was perhaps the biggest change. I got a chance to express my remorse at my actions and to hear how I'd impacted their life. This person, an exemplar of grace, also told me that they were glad I'd gotten help, that they were proud of me, and that they knew I was more than my actions. At that point, I didn't know that yet. I still struggle with the idea that I am more than my worst mistake, but at that moment I started to believe it. They thanked me, I thanked them, I called my sponsor and cried with gratitude and grief, wishing this could have happened sooner. I only wish that I would have had more opportunities to talk to more people, that I'd known about this kind of program from the outset of my case, so that more people impacted could have found some healing, which is just through this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to all 3 panelists. It's really interesting, the themes that we see here and what you all shared, and really about building stronger communities and relationships with each other. And despite who we are and our differences and similarities and our diverse county, and really being proactive in practicing that, I think, and it all starts somewhere, right? And how do we build upon that? So we will be going into community conversations shortly at each table, but before we do that, we have someone I'd like to invite up front. Alwa Gordon is an amazing musician, songwriter, rapper, artist in our community, and I believe he has some spoken word to share with us. Thank you, Alwa, for joining us.
My name is Alwa Gordy. I'm born and raised in Santa Cruz County, and I have some spoken word that I wanted to share with you guys, but before I get into that, a little bit about maybe just what inspired it in my experience. A lot of my experience, I guess, in the justice system is more like criminal justice system and having to deal with going to court. I think it's really tricky because just growing up in Santa Cruz, already being minority, there's the idea of self-worth and like acceptance and do I belong? And then if you get yourself in a situation where you are going to court, it's dehumanizing, right? You can feel like I'm a number. They're judging me for my circumstances. They're judging me for these actions that I know are not me. Am I a bad person now? So when I'm here now and I see like the work that people are working to do, it's hopeful in a way because it makes me feel like, all right, great. Had we had these moments back then, maybe things could have been different. And years later when I grew up, and I'm more responsible now, I promise, but years later when I grew up, I actually had to submit paperwork to get my record expunged, right? And during that process, I had to essentially write a letter about why I did the things that I did. And when I was older, I understood why. I understood the why behind it, right? Like at the time when these things happened, I didn't understand why I didn't care about consequences. I didn't understand why I felt comfortable doing these things. So I think at the core of it is just a level of understanding and how can we understand each other better, right? How can we judge each other less? It's very easy, I think, to attach an action to a person, but I think we're all a lot more than our actions. This song or poem is called One and All, and it was written through moments like that where I had self-doubt and really just a need to express how I felt, so I hope you guys like it. You see, I never took advice, so look at me now. A couple misdemeanor charges in this felony crowd. They got the keys to success, man, they telling me how. But your words don't mean nothing, just you yelling them out. Man, I'm exhausted. But you know how a boss lives. They don't believe in God and ask Jesus what the cross did. Hold in my heart, just know that I lost big, but reap what I sow, man. It's kind of like a cross stitch. I let it sink in my seat sinking. Left lane swerving, I'm certain the lights blinking. Knowing that I'm working, I'm focused on better things. Have me fighting through the pain for sake of the better dreams. Thinking, how can I be free when I still feel oppressed? When I can get popped just because of how I dress. And my daughter's too young, I wonder will she understand that her father's nothing more than another black man. Like shout out to America, middle class hysteria. Where cops stay daring and like staring to this Derringer. Sight up on my back, I was born to be a target. And even if I'm rich, I will still be regardless. Hard as I'm working, still worthless as an artist. And searching for that truth that had me walking in the darkness. Remember when we slept on the floor of that apartment? I never knew a rose could grow from dirty carpets. Apologies for being negative. I took too many sedatives to balance out my life despite this night feeling heaven sent. Man, you know it's effortless, like who you know won't effort this? They pulling out the stretch and quit. We let them rip, I see them die now. And middle fingers up, cause kings never lie down. Define sounds, we running with 5 rounds. I pray for anybody I clown when I ride around. So be careful who you rockin' with. Speak truth and just watch how they acknowledge it. Bury all their hate and fuck that love from accomplishment. A hard pill to swallow while you ducking all them hollow tips. I lost a couple friends, got killed over drugs. We watched a hammer drop, let the jury and the judge. That's why I can't be always popping bottles in the club. Cause you can't be a prophet putting profit over love, that's love. I say you can't be a prophet putting profit over love, that's love. My name's Oliver Gordon, thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Alwa. I would like to invite you, if you'd like to go back to your tables, you're welcome to. And everyone, please stay at your tables. I think we have a slide for the community conversations. Each table will have one prompt. And I think we have maybe some table captains that will go around and help, but you see them up here. And so make sure you introduce yourself. Build those relationships with each other at the table. And even if it's 2 of you or 10 at that. And if you're standing up in the back, please join a table. All right, community, how was that? Was that a good exercise? Built relationships at each table, and you had some prompts and questions. This is the closing part, and there are still some tables in our resource fair outside afterwards. Please visit all of them. There's just so many existing programs, and we talked about that in one of our prompts about what will we do to move this work forward. And I think we all agree how important it is to continue the work and to expand the work and to share restorative justice practices in everything. And like one of the panelists said, to expand it into more crimes, more programs, to have more accessibility, more resources, and I think eventually we'll have just an amazing, healthy community if we can get to that point, right? I see a lot of heads nodding. So please continue to stay involved. For those that are newer to this process, like myself, I've learned so much. And let's keep going. And Assembly Bill 60, if you're interested, there's a QR code here. And this is really about increasing restorative justice in our community, and the Conflict Resolution Center has workshops and information outside that you can check into. And there's Restorative Justice 101 training, which starts May 21st. So I'm always checking the calendar and seeing what dates and what's coming up next, and sharing with people. So even if you can't make it, if you can share with your community, with your neighbors, with your coworkers, whoever you feel would be interested and benefit in attending or going through and learning more. So please scan this. I know that the shared safety workshop, the shared safety work group, please stand up if you're on that shared safety work group. So I just want to say thank you for all of your work that you've been doing. And I, have learned a lot about the work that you have done. Thank you so much also to Sarah Emmert, who was a big organizer of this event and kept all of us organized with her timelines, which was really helpful. And to everyone who was part of the panelists, and to everyone who is engaged in this work, and for being here and showing up, and for all that you do. Truly, thank you. And please continue to build those relationships and visit the resource tables out there. And we hope to do this maybe again in the future. Maybe it's an annual event or a smaller version or bigger. Or bigger. Who knows? But it takes a lot, and that comes from all of you all. And so thank you so much, and thank you to United Way and everybody involved. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. 10 ways to live restoratively. If you want to take a screenshot of that, but really, truly, we saw all of these themes through our conversation. So thank you.